For 1900 years, the portrayal of Jesus Christ was controlled by the church. It was a portrayal always subordinate to the final authority of the words in the gospel, until, at the turn of the 20th century, the word itself was challenged by the new technology of the machine age. Inventions that raised the disturbing question, how do you portray the Son of God?
Because it's impossible to make a film about Jesus.
How do you show somebody who is certifiably human, but also has this special significance of being a channel of God?
I know enough to know that it is impossible to write a Jesus story because we don't know anything about this man.
By a curious irony, the machine age would bring us the Word made very human flesh. As the magic lantern, projecting still images of Jesus down a beam of light, began to be replaced by a magical new device that made pictures move. By the end of the 19th century, the film camera was recording history as it happened. When in 1898 Pope Leo XIII had his attention drawn to the camera filming his carriage, he bestowed a papal blessing, almost as though he were baptizing the age of cinema. Among those first turn-of-the-century movies were mimed versions of the gospel stories. They were rather like Victorian religious postcards stumbling into life. Soon the new medium's power of illusion and distortion became apparent. Film could not only produce a stormy Sea of Galilee, it could conjure up a submarine Christ who rose from the depths before walking on water. By 1910, the life of Christ was being sold by the reel. Now the gospel story could be spread for commercial gain to the furthest corners of the civilized world. Sensing the propaganda power of the new medium, the church sounded a confident proprietorial note.
These pictures are going to be a great force. It is the age of pictures. See the billboards and the magazines. More and more pictures all the time. The moving pictures are going to be the best teachers and the best preachers in the history of the world. Mark my words, there are two things coming. Prohibition and motion pictures. We must make people think above the belt.
In 1912, with the church's blessing, an American film company called Calum took their cameras to Egypt and the Holy Land for the first on-the-spot version of the gospel story. These Jerusalem scenes of the slaughter of the innocents were uncomfortably close to what's happening off-camera, as the producer Sid Alcott recalled.
Suddenly, a Mohammedan mob set upon us with clubs. I recognized them as members of a gang who had previously tried to extort money from us. So I whipped out my revolver and made threatening motions with it, and they withdrew.
Jesus was played by an upper-class Englishman called Henderson Bland. Some years later, Bland wrote about the experience in prose that aspired towards the biblical.
To portray Jesus without gross offense to the holiest instincts and feelings of millions meant such a surrender of soul as to make my normal life seem strange to me, and my immediate memory is alien.
In Hollywood, 4 years later, D.W. Griffiths, the man who turned the rough carpentry of film into a sophisticated art, was attracted by the Jesus story. He used it as one of 4 separate narratives set in different periods of history, from Babylon to the present day. Griffith's backers became alarmed by his expanding budget and his indelicate treatment of scenes like the wedding at Cana. He seemed to be implying that Jesus was the life and soul of the wrong kind of party. But since there was gospel authority for wine drinking, Griffiths was allowed to keep the scene in, provided he added a subtitle that got Jesus off the alcohol charge. As Jesus on the silver screen turned water into wine, America, led by the Christian temperance movement, was preparing to vote in prohibition. Still a powerful political force, the church was determined to keep the brash new medium of cinema under ecclesiastical control.
So the church has always tried to have what you might call a proprietary interest in the, if not a monopoly, in depicting Jesus and his significance. So again, movies, of course, movies about Jesus have been very controversial. The churches have felt nervous about this. Who are these guys with cameras and lights to be depicting this figure who is the one that we have the kind of monopoly distribution license for?
In King of Kings, the house of Mary Magdalene was curiously infested with zebras. But this was the definitive Jesus movie, Hollywood style. Spectacular, sentimental, absurd. The most expensive silent movie ever made, Cecil B. DeMille's epic showed a fine disregard for historical accuracy.
I think the movie shows an interesting blend of showmanship, eroticism, vulgarity, and a rather charmingly naive or faux naive picture postcard piety. It opens with this splendid scene in Mary Magdalene's home. Mary Magdalene, against all probability, is imagined as this fabulously wealthy courtesan, and Judas appears to be her spoiled playboy lover. I like the film because it has a kind of magic lantern quality. It makes intriguing use of special effects. I liked the scene in which the demons are cast out from Mary Magdalene and you see them all swirling around her.
DeMille kept his Jesus, H.B. Warner, separated from the rest of the cast so that he could preserve a mood of solemn reverence. But Warner's sober demeanor was a triumph of acting, for in Prohibition America, and to the dismay of his leading lady, he was drinking heroic quantities of illicit whiskey.